I went to her gallery to see the photos I'd just taken of my fiancée. Then I found dark shots of her with another man. She snatched the phone, deleted them, and burst into tears. My name's Colin. I'm 30, work as a freelance photographer, and for a long time I thought I understood people through the lens. I could read expressions, spot lies in the way someone's eyes softened when they smiled. But that Saturday at the lake, I learned that sometimes the face you think you know best hides the darkest things behind the calmest eyes. It started simple. My fiancée, Harper, had wanted some new pictures for her portfolio. She was trying to rebrand herself as a lifestyle blogger, and I'd been helping with her content for months. We spent the day taking shots by the dock, through the reeds, under the sun where the lake caught the light like broken glass. She was laughing, her hair messy from the wind, and it felt natural. Easy. The kind of weekend that makes you forget life has edges. When we got back to the cabin, she went to shower while I made us dinner. Her phone was on the counter, screen lighting up every few seconds from notifications. I wasn't the type to check her phone. I never had a reason to. But I wanted to see how the shots turned out. I'd taken a few on her phone too, using portrait mode because she said my camera made her look too sharp. So I opened the gallery. The first few were exactly what I expected. Her smiling, wind in her hair, blue sky behind her. Then, mixed halfway through, there were photos I hadn't taken. Dark ones. Blurry frames like they'd been shot in low light, maybe at night. A bed, a mirror, bare legs tangled in sheets. Harper's face half visible. Another man's arm. Pale, muscular, a tattoo near the shoulder. They weren't posed like art. They were raw, messy, taken close enough to feel accidental. And what froze me wasn't the act itself, but the familiarity of her necklace. The same one she was wearing today at the lake. The timestamp said 2 nights ago. My first thought was that it was some kind of mistake, that maybe these were old photos she'd forgotten to delete, or screenshots from a past life. But then I looked closer. In the corner of one frame, there was her current phone case's reflection in the mirror, same pink one with the chipped corner. The sound of running water stopped. I turned as Harper came out in a towel, humming softly. I didn't hide the phone. She saw it in my hand, still lit up with her gallery open. Everything in her froze. She crossed the room in seconds, snatching the phone with a speed that made the towel nearly slip. She fumbled, hit delete, one by one, her hands shaking so hard that the screen stuttered. Then she just dropped the phone on the counter and sank to the floor, sobbing. No words, just sound. That sharp, broken breathing that doesn't belong to guilt or fear, but both. I didn't yell. I didn't even move. I remember the smell of dinner burning behind me, the clock ticking, the sound of her sobs echoing off the cabin walls. Finally, she managed to speak. Said something about old photos, about blackmail, about a man she used to know who had them saved somewhere. The words tumbled, disjointed, tangled in panic. I just stood there. Then I said one sentence, that the necklace in the photo was the same she wore today, that she'd been at the lake with me 2 days ago. She looked at me like she'd been shot. No denial this time. Just a long silence, then more tears. She said it happened once. Said she'd been drunk, confused. Claimed the guy had taken pictures without consent. That she'd been terrified I'd see them. That's why she'd been distant lately. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I'd loved her for 3 years, lived with her for 1. You don't just erase that with a handful of blurry photos. But the part that killed me wasn't the act. It was the deletion. The panic. The lie she reached for instead of the truth. She begged for forgiveness, clutching my leg like she was drowning. I could feel her nails through my jeans. I didn't pull away. I told her to get up, to breathe, to talk. She wouldn't. She kept repeating that it was over, that she'd handled it. That word, handled, stuck in my head. When she finally stopped crying, she went to bed early. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at her phone screen, still faintly lit with the message recently deleted, 6 items. I knew she'd erased them permanently, but I also knew about automatic cloud backups. Harper wasn't tech savvy. She barely knew how to format an SD card. Still, I didn't open her cloud that night. I didn't even touch her phone again. I cleaned up the burnt dinner, opened a beer, and sat on the porch listening to the crickets. She came out an hour later, red-eyed, wrapped in a blanket. Sat beside me, silent. We didn't talk. The air between us was heavy, not with anger, but something worse, clarity. She knew I didn't believe her, and I knew she wasn't done lying. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. She said she wanted to fix things, that she loved me, that she'd cut ties completely. I nodded once. She reached for my hand. I let her hold it. But inside, everything felt mechanical, like my body was running on scripts I didn't believe in anymore. Later that night, while she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The photos, the reflection, the necklace, the timestamp, and her eyes, wide, terrified, not of me, but of something else. That's when it hit me. She wasn't crying because she was guilty. She was crying because she'd been caught too soon. Something told me that night wasn't the end of it. It was just the first crack in whatever she'd built. The next morning, she made breakfast like nothing had happened. Pancakes, coffee, even a nervous little laugh about how we should take more photos. I watched her, the way she smiled too quickly, how her hands trembled pouring syrup. It was almost convincing. Almost. But when she left the table, I noticed her phone lighting up again. A message preview from a name I didn't recognize. Same place tonight? She saw me glance at it and snatched the phone before I could react. Said it was a client. And that's when I smiled for the first time since last night. Not because I believed her, but because I finally knew where this was heading. She thought she'd deleted the truth, but she had no idea how much was still left in the shadows. For 2 days, Harper acted as if nothing had happened. She made small talk about dinner, about our plans for the fall, about maybe taking a weekend trip. I matched her tone. It wasn't forgiveness, it was strategy. People reveal themselves fastest when they think the danger has passed. On Tuesday night, she sat cross-legged on the couch editing photos for a brand collaboration. I watched her scroll past one of the lake shots, the same day I'd seen the dark pictures. She smiled faintly, told me I made her look calm. That word hit like static. Calm wasn't what I saw in her eyes that day. Later, while she showered, her phone buzzed again. This time I didn't need to open it. The preview said enough. Can we talk about what happened at the motel? The name on the screen was Zane R. I'd never heard her mention a Zane. When she came back, towel around her hair, she noticed the unread message still glowing. Her expression didn't crack, but her breathing changed, short, clipped, deliberate. She said it was a spam text, that she'd blocked him before. Then she laughed, a sound too sharp to be real. I let it slide. There would be another chance. That chance came Friday. We went out to dinner downtown at a restaurant she loved. Soft lights, piano music, everything designed to look effortless. She dressed up more than usual, hair straightened, perfume strong enough to taste. I told her she looked beautiful. She smiled in relief, not joy. The lie was comforting her. Midway through dinner, her phone lit up again. She flipped it face down too quickly. I asked, gently, if that was the client again. Her fork froze. She said yes. I said I'd love to meet him sometime, maybe collaborate since he liked her content so much. The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend the candle flame. Then she slipped. She muttered, almost to herself, that she wasn't seeing him anymore, not since the lake motel. The words landed like a dropped glass. I didn't move. I just asked what motel she meant. She realized her mistake instantly, tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. That was the same weekend she told me she'd been at her cousin's. She tried to spin it, saying she'd meant a different lake, an old trip, anything to patch the hole. I stood up, left cash for the bill, and walked out. She followed me through the parking lot, heels slapping the pavement, voice rising between sobs and anger. People stared. I didn't care. At home, she was waiting by the door, trembling. She asked why I'd left, why I wouldn't talk. I told her she'd already talked enough. Then I unlocked the door and walked in. That's when the real shock came. My roommate, Damien, was in the kitchen. He'd been my friend since college, a quiet guy, graphic designer, the kind who could vanish in a crowd. Harper froze when she saw him. Her voice dropped to a whisper, the kind people use in funerals. He didn't look surprised, just tired. She started crying again, the same way she had in the cabin. Too suddenly, too rehearsed. I told her to stop pretending and say whatever truth was left. She turned on Damien instead, screaming that he'd promised to stay out of it. That's how I learned he already knew about the motel. The room tilted for a moment. Damien finally spoke. He said she'd come to him weeks ago, crying about money, asking for advice. Said she couldn't afford rent if I left, couldn't keep up her brand. Then she'd asked him to lend her cash until her next sponsorship came through. He refused. Later she told him about a man who helped her out, but was starting to demand more than photos. She'd made herself sound like the victim. I wanted to believe Damien, but part of me wondered if he was just covering himself. There was tension between them, an electricity that felt older than tonight. Harper shouted that he was lying, that he'd tried to kiss her once. Damien didn't deny it. He said she used that kiss to manipulate him, to keep him quiet about Zane. It was chaos. Every word pulled the floor lower. Finally, I said enough. I told Harper to leave. She refused, claiming she'd explain everything if I'd just let her breathe. I told her to pack her things and that we were finished. She broke down again, begging, promising to prove it wasn't what I thought. I opened the door and waited. Eventually she left, slamming it so hard the frame rattled. Damien sat at the table with his head in his hands. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then he admitted he'd seen her with someone once, outside a gym on West Street. The guy had a tattoo near his shoulder, same design I'd glimpsed in the dark photo. I asked why he hadn't told me sooner. He said because he thought I already knew. Harper had told him we were on a break. When he went to bed, I sat alone in the dark, trying to piece together the new puzzle. The lake motel, the cousin's lie, the mysterious Zane. Every thread led back to the same conclusion. She wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of losing control. Around midnight, a message arrived on my phone. Not hers, mine. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Just one line. She's not who you think she is. Meet me tomorrow. Coffee house on 7th. I didn't answer. I didn't even screenshot it. But I couldn't sleep. The next morning, curiosity outweighed reason. I went. The cafe was quiet, the kind where time moves slowly. A woman sat near the window, early 30s, sharp features, dark circles under her eyes. When I introduced myself, she said she was Leah, Zane's wife. She told me everything. Zane and Harper had been seeing each other for months. He was her gym instructor, married with 2 kids. Leah had found out after seeing unfamiliar perfume receipts and messages hidden under fake contact names. The night Harper claimed she'd been blackmailed, she'd actually met Zane at the lake motel. Leah had followed him there and photographed the whole thing, through the window, flash off. Those dark, blurry photos were hers. She'd sent them to Harper as a warning. Harper must have panicked and saved them to her phone, not realizing the timestamps would expose her. By the time Leah finished talking, my coffee was cold. The world felt quiet again, but not in a peaceful way. It was the silence before something breaks. I thanked her, left the cafe, and drove home. Harper's car was already in the driveway. She was waiting by the door, pretending she hadn't seen me yet, holding a bag of groceries like a peace offering. I told her we needed to talk, inside, where nobody could interrupt. Her hands shook. She followed me in. That was the moment she realized I wasn't guessing anymore. Harper stood in the kitchen holding the grocery bag as if it could shield her. I closed the door behind us and said I'd just met Leah. The name alone drained the color from her face. She dropped the bag. Apples rolled across the floor. For a moment she didn't speak. Then came the lies again, layered, desperate. She said Leah was obsessed, that she'd been harassing both of them for months. The words were too rehearsed. I told her I'd seen the timestamp, the reflection in the mirror, the same necklace she'd worn to dinner. Her breathing turned shallow. She tried shifting blame, accusing Damien of stirring things. I said Damien had only confirmed what she'd started. She switched tactics fast, as if she had a script for every accusation. The motel was a mistake. Zane was controlling. She'd wanted to tell me, but feared losing everything. I told her she'd already lost it. She dropped to her knees, crying harder than before. This time I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not pity. Just exhaustion. I asked one last question, whether she'd been with Zane after that night. Her silence answered it. When she finally left, she didn't slam the door. She just whispered that she'd make it right. The next week was eerily quiet. She texted a few times, asking to talk. I ignored her. But inside, I wasn't finished. Not out of revenge. Out of principle. I wanted her lies to end where they began, in the open. So I started collecting what I already had. Photos, receipts, message logs. I didn't hack her phone or stalk her accounts. I didn't need to. She'd left a trail in plain sight. Shared folders, cloud backups, email confirmations from a motel chain. Every timestamp matched her sick cousin weekend. I called Damien into the living room one night, told him what I planned. He hesitated, said it would be cruel. I said cruelty would be letting her keep lying to everyone who still believed her. He nodded slowly. 2 days later, I sent invitations for a small engagement dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant downtown. Her parents confirmed right away. So did her sister, a few mutual friends, and, because irony loves an audience, Zane and his wife Leah. I told Harper I wanted to make peace, to start over publicly. She agreed instantly, eager to prove she was still the one in control. When the night came, everything looked perfect. The restaurant's private dining room glowed with candlelight and white tablecloths. Harper arrived first, radiant in a silver dress I'd bought her months ago. She hugged me like nothing had happened. I let her. Guests began to filter in, smiling, drinking, unaware. Leah arrived quietly and sat near the back. Zane came later, pretending not to see her. I watched Harper's fingers twitch under the table. Dinner flowed smoothly for a while. Laughter, small talk, wine. Then I stood and thanked everyone for coming. I said I wanted to show something. A journey of love captured through the lens. The restaurant had a projector for private events. I connected my laptop. The slideshow began with the good memories. Our trips, our smiles, moments that looked effortless. People clapped softly. Harper relaxed. Then the next set rolled in. The lake photos. Her smile started to fade. Then the dark ones, the grainy motel shots, restored from the cloud backup. Gasps filled the room. One woman dropped her fork. Harper's parents went silent. I let each image linger long enough for recognition, but not cruelty. And then, the final slide. A still frame zoomed in on the mirror reflection, Zane's tattoo. The silence turned suffocating. Leah stood first. Calm. I'd told her beforehand, not to hurt her, but to give her the truth she'd been denied. She walked up to the table, set down her ring, and said only, "We're done." Then she left. Zane followed her out, stammering, trying to explain, bumping into a waiter on his way. Harper stayed seated, frozen. Her parents were pale. Her mother whispered something I couldn't hear. Her father muttered that he'd raised her better. She turned to me then, eyes wide, mouth open but no sound coming out. I told her I hadn't meant to humiliate her, just to stop the lies. That every person here had been part of the performance she built. That now they could see the truth she'd hidden behind filters and captions. She bolted up, knocking over her glass. The red wine spread across the white tablecloth like blood. She screamed that I'd ruined her, that I'd violated her privacy, that she'd never forgive me. I told her she'd taken those photos herself, that all I did was show the audience she'd chosen. Security approached, but she pushed past them, fled into the street, still crying. The room was silent again. Someone turned off the projector. Guests left quietly. Only Damien stayed behind, sitting across from me. He asked if I felt better. I said no, just finished. By the next morning, the fallout was everywhere. Harper's sister called, asking if it was real. Her father left me a voicemail thanking me for being honest. Zane's wife filed for separation the same day. The gym where he worked suspended him pending investigation. Harper texted me that afternoon. A single message. "You think this makes you righteous? Wait until you see what I can do." But she couldn't do much. Within a week, her sponsorships pulled out. Word spread fast in the small influencer circles. Photos leaked online, not the explicit ones, but enough to confirm the story. She deleted her account soon after. I didn't post anything. I didn't respond to comments or messages. I just went quiet. For a while I wondered if I'd gone too far. Then I remembered the look on Leah's face when she finally saw proof. The relief, not the pain. That made it worth it. A month later, Damien moved out to stay with his brother. Said he needed a break from all the noise. I didn't stop him. The apartment felt emptier but cleaner, like air after a storm. One evening, while cleaning up, I found an envelope under the doormat. Inside was a photo, me and Harper at the lake, the original shot she'd asked me to take. On the back, in her handwriting, "You could have forgiven me." I burned it in the sink without reading it twice. I didn't want forgiveness. I wanted distance. Harper vanished from the city soon after. Someone said she'd moved in with a cousin downstate, working in a cafe. I didn't confirm it. I didn't need to. For the first time in months, I started sleeping through the night. But sometimes I still think about that dinner, about how truth, once it's shown, doesn't free anyone. It just changes what kind of cage they live in. In the days that followed the dinner, silence spread faster than gossip. No one called to confirm what they'd seen. They didn't have to. The truth had a way of rotting in the open. All I did was tear down the wrapping. Harper disappeared for 3 days. When she resurfaced, it was through a text to her sister, saying she was safe. That word told me everything. She wasn't sorry. She was hiding. The fallout reached every corner of her life. Her parents froze her accounts. They'd been quietly supporting her lifestyle behind the scenes. Her brand deals dissolved one by one. The manager who once called her a natural face for authenticity stopped returning emails. Every trace of her online persona started peeling away like old paint. Meanwhile, Zane's world imploded. The gym fired him after Leah's public statement confirmed the affair. His clients canceled memberships, and his name became a running joke in local gossip pages. Leah filed for divorce within a week and took their 2 children to her parents' house. For the first time since this began, I realized what real collateral damage looked like. I kept my distance from all of it. Didn't post, didn't gloat, didn't speak about it to anyone. But one evening, I saw her. It was a Thursday, 3 weeks after the dinner. I was walking home from a client shoot downtown, passing a small cafe near the bus stop. Through the window, I spotted her, hair darker now, makeup gone, wearing a plain uniform. She was wiping tables. For a moment, I thought she hadn't seen me. Then her eyes lifted and locked onto mine through the glass. No anger, no tears, just a kind of hollow recognition. She looked like someone who had outlived herself. I didn't go in. I kept walking. That night, she texted me again. "I saw you today. You look good. I'm glad you're okay." I deleted it without reading the rest. There was nothing to say anymore. Some endings didn't need words, just distance. Weeks passed. Work picked up again. I took a few new clients, started spending weekends out of the city, and little by little, the noise faded. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. One afternoon, while sorting through old memory cards, I found a forgotten folder labeled Lake Weekend. I almost deleted it on instinct, but decided to open it first. Inside were the untouched photos from before everything went wrong. Harper smiling at the dock, sunlight catching her hair. There was one I hadn't remembered taking. She was looking at me, not the camera, her expression soft, unguarded. For a few seconds, I felt something close to sadness. Then I noticed what was behind her, a blurred reflection in the cabin window. Zane, standing there, watching. It wasn't a ghost from the past. It was evidence of how early it had started. That photo was from our first day at the lake. She'd invited him before she even asked me to come. I stared at the screen until it felt absurd to still be hurt. Then I closed the laptop and formatted the card. But that wasn't the end. A month later, Leah reached out again. She wanted to meet for coffee, said there was something she needed to tell me. I hesitated, but curiosity won. We met at the same cafe where she'd first told me everything. She looked lighter now, stronger. There was a quiet satisfaction in her posture that didn't come from revenge, just survival. She thanked me for being honest, said the exposure had been painful but freeing. Then she told me something I hadn't expected. Zane had been trying to reach me. He'd written letters, emails, messages, not to apologize, but to accuse. He claimed Harper had told him I'd set them up, that the slideshow was some twisted manipulation. I laughed, but Leah didn't. She said he believed it completely. He'd lost his job, his marriage, and his reputation, and instead of accepting blame, he'd rewritten the story to make himself the victim. That night, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You think you won?" No message body, just a single attachment, an old photo of Harper and me at the cabin, with the caption typed over it, "You destroyed both of us." I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Leah and deleted it. But for the first time in weeks, sleep didn't come easily. Not because I feared Zane. He was too broken to be dangerous, but because I realized something uncomfortable. Revenge didn't end anything. It just balanced the scale for a moment before gravity reset it. By fall, the city started to feel livable again. I moved to a smaller apartment closer to my studio, a place with less space for ghosts. My days filled with work, and my nights were quiet. Sometimes too quiet. Then, one evening, as I was closing the studio, Leah dropped by. She'd been taking photography lessons, wanted advice on lighting setups. We talked for hours. She laughed easily, without bitterness. Somewhere between showing her how to adjust aperture and cleaning up cables, I realized I wasn't thinking about Harper anymore. Over the next few weeks, Leah and I saw each other more often. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't romantic, at least not at first. But there was something comforting about two people who had walked through the same fire and didn't need to explain the burns. When it did turn into something more, it wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet decision to stop pretending we were only comparing camera lenses. Months passed. One evening, we went to dinner at the same Italian restaurant where everything had fallen apart. The staff had changed, the projector gone. The tablecloths were still white. We laughed about the irony, not bitterly, but almost kindly. The world had moved on, and so had we. Halfway through dessert, the waiter handed me a small envelope. No name, no return address. Inside was a folded note written in familiar handwriting. "I forgive you. Do you forgive me?" No signature, but I knew. I tore it in half and left it under the plate. Not from anger, from peace. When we stepped outside, the air was cold, and Leah slipped her hand into mine. Across the street, through the restaurant window, I saw a woman in a cafe uniform walking past with a delivery bag. I couldn't tell if it was Harper. I didn't need to know. As we walked away, Leah said something that stuck with me. She said some people burn bridges because they think they're fireworks, bright, loud, and worth watching. But when the smoke clears, they realize they're standing in the dark, alone. That was Harper's ending. Mine was quieter. And if I ever wondered whether exposing her had been the right thing to do, I'd think back to that lake. The reflection in the window, the truth hiding in plain sight. You can't erase what's already captured. You can only decide what to focus on next. I chose to look forward.